All right, welcome back to the channel. My name is Coach Jordan Hardgrave. Today we're going to be reading an email from somebody named Anna, and she is experiencing very severe derealization, and it's been ongoing for 3 years now, and it's really ruining her life. And her mom is trying to help her, but she's actually making it worse. And so in this email, I don't just want to read it and respond to it, give tips, encouragement, spread awareness, feedback, but I also want to speak specifically to the loved ones who have somebody that's going through depersonalization or derealization. Could be that you're the mom, the dad, the grandma, the grandpa, brother, sister, coworker. There could be all kinds of different dynamics, and you just don't really know how to help them. And I want to give you just a few tips, because whenever my clients are going through these symptoms, inevitably they're going to have people around them that are concerned and try to help, and a lot of times inadvertently make things worse. In their attempt to help, they end up hindering their recovery. And so we want to avoid that. Let's get to it. Okay, so hey, Jordan, it's been 3 years since my world stopped feeling real. 3 years since that first moment when I looked around and thought, this can't be happening. I was 19 on my way home from college, and everything looked strange, too bright, too sharp, almost like a movie set. I thought I was just tired, but the feeling never went away. Which, by the way, I'm drinking, I think it's called, is it Mountain Valley or Green Mountain or something like that? Blueberry coffee. My wife is like, you didn't get Green Mountain. That's the worst coffee ever. It's really not that great, but it's blueberry and it actually tastes pretty good. I love blueberry coffee. Okay, so anyway, it appears as if she's describing derealization. Okay, not a diagnosis, but just for educational purposes, derealization is whenever everything starts to feel off. You start to feel like things are fake, dreamlike. Some people describe it as they feel like they're high. Some people feel like there's a wall of glass between them and reality. There's all kinds of analogies that people use, but it's almost impossible to describe. I know that for me, there were a lot of symptoms happening at the same time too. So it wasn't just that everything felt fake and dreamlike for me. Time also felt very weird. It felt like time was moving either super fast or super slow, almost like in slow motion sometimes, as well as I was simultaneously experiencing depersonalization, where I felt detached from my body. Not a full out of body experience or anything, but my hands just didn't feel like they were my own hands. I'd constantly check and I'd be like, is it there? And then if I felt detached, I go, oh, and I'd panic and try to get away from it. And I think I was projecting that sense of disconnection from my own body onto other people. So I looked at other people, and not only did they feel just not real along with everything else I was looking at, but they almost felt robotic. It's almost like I was projecting my sense of disconnection onto them. So I felt detached from my body, and thus I didn't feel connected. I didn't have the normal perception of other people's bodies. Their bodies felt very robotic and very detached. It was just, and then you add on to that, also, it felt like the history that I had with people, some people that I'd known my whole life, was just erased. And whenever you look at somebody that you've known for years and years and years, and it literally feels like they're a stranger to you, that was one of the most bizarre things that I've ever been through in my entire life. And then, of course, looking in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel connected to my reflection. And it's impossible to explain, but the way that I explain it is, I'll never forget, I have a brother who kind of looks kind of like me, except maybe not as big of a nose, and definitely doesn't have this epic Adam's apple that kids walk by and they're like, why is a bump on your neck? Why is there a bump on your neck? And one kid one time was like, do you have cancer? And I was like, nope, just skinny. But anyway, but I remember I felt like I was looking at my brother, right? Which he looks similar, but also very different. And it was so bizarre. again, there's no words that will capture this feeling, which is part of what makes it so hard with these things that we're talking about. Is there's not a perfect analogy or metaphor that describes it. But it was so terrifying to look in the mirror that I literally would look down. I trained myself to look down while I was brushing my teeth because I didn't want to look in the mirror. I started to avoid it. So anyway, with that being said, there were a plethora of experiences that I was having together. It wasn't just that things felt fake and dreamlike. It wasn't just that I felt detached from my body. There were all kinds of things happening. And then my memory was thrown off, had severe anxious thoughts, existential OCD started to happen, obsession with existence, consciousness, awareness of consciousness, existence, the afterlife, meditating on the nature of reality. I'd look at a tree and my mind would be like, well, what's a tree? What is bark? And then, I could just go on and on and on. Panic attacks at one point in time, I was having 20 panic attacks a day. So whenever you guys hear me talking a lot about depersonalization, realization, I just want you to know the clients that I work with, and also my own experience whenever I went through symptoms, they're not just experiencing only depersonalization, realization. Usually, every now and then, that's the case, but very rare. Most of the time, there's anxiety. A lot of times, there's panic attacks, but not always. There's anxious thoughts, memory issues, time feels distorted. A lot of times, there's health anxiety. A lot of times, there's existential OCD. There's a big web of symptoms, but the reason why I talk a lot about DPDR is because these are some of the most misunderstood symptoms. And people think that these symptoms are the problem. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. People think that it's like a tree. They think that DPDR is up here because they're the most terrifying symptoms that they're experiencing. And all the other symptoms are symptoms of depersonalization, derealization. So people come to me and they'll be like, hey, is light sensitivity a symptom of depersonalization, realization? And that's not. That's actually a symptom of anxiety or fight or flight response. People will say, hey, my memory is off. Is that a symptom of DPDR? No, that's one of many symptoms of a trauma state, which is a state of nervous system overwhelm. And that's why, by the way, that depersonalization, realization are happening, which I wish I would have known this during my recovery. They're there due to a state of traumatic, overwhelming stress, okay? It's not just anxiety, it's traumatic stress, right? And the reason that we know that is because there's no reason for your brain to deploy such severe dissociative symptoms like depersonalization, realization, if you're in fight or flight response. So there's really no such thing as anxiety. It's really fight or flight response because there's still a fighting chance, right? Let's say there's a lion present. You're either going to fight the lion or you're going to flee from the lion. And so if there's still a fighting chance, your brain doesn't need to start to dissociate you in the form of making you feel detached from your body or from the material world. That's only going to happen at the point of overwhelm. And that doesn't mean panic, by the way. I just started working with a client. He's a very calm, cool-headed, collected guy. I think he's in the finance world. But anyway, he's just like cool as a cucumber. And he ended up, it was a combination of psilocybin, mushrooms, and then he was at kind of some sort of event, a music event or something, and his friend said, hey, I've also got some marijuana. It was an edible, or I can't remember. And so the psilocybin, the mushrooms and the weed together ended up producing a very severe reaction in his nervous system, but he never panicked, but he started to feel depersonalization and derealization. Well, actually, he only experienced derealization, not depersonalization. But I told him, I'm like, even though you weren't panicking, you felt like you couldn't escape. And that's what ended up happening is he tried to take a car to go home, but the car didn't show up. He had to take another car, like an Uber or something, and they went the wrong direction or something. He felt trapped, just like I felt trapped whenever I smoked marijuana and had a panic attack, and I called for my friends to call an ambulance and they wouldn't do it. Trauma happens at the point of overwhelm. It's whenever your nervous system perceives that there's no escape. And whenever your nervous system perceives that there's no escape, part of the way that your nervous system helps you is by making you feel very, very disconnected. Because if you're being eaten by a lion and you can't feel it, right? Because you're so numb and disconnected from your body and from the material world, that's actually quite helpful in that situation. And so, anyway, I want to get back to the email, but just to let you know, it's not usually just DPDR. It can be, and I do see that sometimes, but most of the time, there's a plethora of other symptoms that people are experiencing. Now I'm 22 and I'm stuck in this nightmare every single day. My house feels like a dollhouse. The faces of my family, people I've loved my whole life, feel unfamiliar, like someone painted them to look like my mom, my dad, and my sister. Sometimes I stare at my mom while she's talking and my brain whispers, is she real? Is any of this real? I hear that all the time from my clients. And this is definitely something that happened. Like I was talking to you about, I remember one time I was drinking a cup of water and my brain was like, well, what is the mechanism that's making your hand move to pick up, the cup to drink the water? I better drink this before it gets cold. But anyway, and what is reality? What is paint? What is a road? What is, sky? Like it was just constant existential questions related to the nature of reality. By the way, not everybody experiences existential OCD, which is obsession with existence, consciousness, the afterlife, and the nature of reality. But a lot of times, if you're experiencing depersonalization, realization, because those symptoms are so existential in nature, it can lead to severe existential obsession and rumination. My mom has been trying to help since the beginning, but honestly, it's just making things worse. At first, she didn't believe me. I tried to explain it to her one night about 6 months after it started. I told her, Mom, I feel like I'm dreaming, like nothing around me is real. She looked at me with this mix of confusion and concern and said, you're probably just stressed. Maybe you should try yoga or take a break from school. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. Depersonalization and derealization are the most terrifying symptoms that I have ever experienced in my entire life. And I've been through a lot. I mean, I was severely bullied from the time I was 5 until about maybe 15, whenever I learned how to do martial arts. Okay, I'll never do that again. But no, I learned how to fight. I started doing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, things like that. But anyway, I'm talking severely bullied. I mean, like this little Harry Potter scar, Voldemort tried to kill me and he couldn't do it. No, but it literally is because a kid threw a giant rock at me. And I've got scars all over my head from kids throwing rocks at me. And I'm not saying woe is me. I'm actually glad it happened because it forged me into a very resilient person. And now nobody bullies me. I do not allow any, and I'm going to talk about it online. Like if somebody wants, I don't even see negative comments, by the way. I've got a team that moderates those. I don't get very many of them, but in real life, I'm talking about, because it's like there's always going to be online people. But I do not allow bullying now. I make it very uncomfortable if somebody wants to try to bully me, which is actually how you prevent bullying. I've heard it said that people should know within a few minutes of interacting with you that harassing you would be a seriously bad idea. That doesn't mean that you have to be aggressive with people, by the way. Be kind to people. But what I used to do is I used to just be so overly kind and open with everybody that I met. I would meet somebody new and I'd be like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Yeah. And for most people, that's going to be fine. But that toxic person that wants to bully you, that's blood in the water. So whenever I meet somebody now, I'll be like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Awesome. Cool. Right. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, wait a second. This is somebody that I'm going to have to earn their respect. So be careful about just throwing your vulnerability and throwing your affection at just anybody, because to the wrong people, that can really, really lead to some issues. But anyway, so I was severely bullied, like I've been through a lot of painful experiences in life that I could go through. I have a full sleeve tattoo that took 4 days of 12-hour sessions, okay? And nothing compares to depersonalization, realization. We had a guy that just came through our program recently. He was actually in the Secret Service, and he was in a meeting one time, and he's like, dude, Like I've taken down multiple bad guys at the same time, and nothing compares to these symptoms. And I tell that to people a lot. I'm like, you might be like David Goggins level resilient, but just because you have kind of a natural resilience does not mean that you have a symptom resilience, right? You can take the most physically, mentally, emotionally resilient person, but these symptoms will bring them to their knees. I mean, I regularly work with people that like are just some of the most strong people physically, mentally, emotionally that you could ever imagine. I mean, I just had a guy come through the program who was going through Navy SEAL training. This has been maybe, was it a year ago? But I actually coached an Army general. I mean, this guy showed up to the session. I mean, he's like very just direct and, very buff. He actually had to work out for his job in the military. Like he was required to lift weights, but yet he was just suffering immensely with severe anxiety and depersonalization realization. It was just crippling him. And that's another thing too, is so many people in the military or police officers, firefighters, or some of the doctors that I work, they're terrified to tell their superiors because they don't want to give up this amazing career that they've built. Anyway, but with that being said, these symptoms will bring the strongest person to their knees. And so what's frustrating is you can't see them, right? So whenever you have loved ones, they're looking at you visually. They're like, okay, well, I mean, you look fine. And, maybe you've gone to the doctor and the doctor is like, we can't find anything, right? We've done CT scans. We've done, blood test. We've looked at this thing and that thing and that thing, and there's just nothing wrong with this person. And so to the uneducated person, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, by the way, uneducated meaning they literally just have not been educated about these symptoms, they're going to see that and they're like, well, you look fine. And the doctors say there's nothing wrong. So maybe it's just all in your head, right? Or maybe you're making it up. But I will tell you, and you're just going to have to please just trust this. That is the most insulting, frustrating thing in the world for the DPDR sufferer, right? And that's one of the reasons that they end up being so stressed out that they can't downregulate their nervous system, is because they're seeking co-regulation. They're seeking another human that will validate their experience so that they can calm down. And all they find is people that the doctor, the therapist is like, I don't know. Like maybe the therapist, which I love therapists, by the way. I get to work with them in my program sometimes. It's wonderful. They're usually some of the most amazing people. But a lot of therapists have never even heard of these symptoms. And so they're like, I don't know, let me look it up in the DSM-5. And then they go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, I've never really heard of these symptoms, but we're checking you out. You look fine. And then they tell you to just go see a therapist or a psychiatrist. And then the therapists and psychiatrists have never even heard of the symptoms, or maybe they have, but then they try to help you with things that are not even specific to those symptoms. And then your friends and family are looking at you like, what's the problem? Like, there's nothing wrong with you. But trust me when I tell you that you can look perfectly normal on the outside, and on the inside, you are going through hell on earth. Depersonalization, realization are death symptoms, okay? And that is not an exaggeration. These symptoms show up at the point of overwhelming stress in the nervous system and body, and they are your brain and body and nervous system preparing you to be eaten by a lion. These are the symptoms that you would experience if you were dying a painful death. It's your brain trying to dissociate you, which comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate. Your brain is like, you know what? This ship is going down. Let's make this person's death as numb and painless as possible. Now, you're not dying, but your brain thinks that you are because there's so much stress happening in your body and nervous system. Okay. And so if you are the loved one of that person, don't assume because the test at the doctor doesn't say anything and because they look fine visually that it doesn't mean that on the inside they are going through absolute hell on earth, feeling detached from your body, feeling detached from your personality, from who you are, feeling like everything's fake and dreamlike, and then all the other plethora of symptoms, that oftentimes come with DPDR. It is terrifying, frustrating, debilitating, crippling for your daily experience. It will literally make it to where it is almost impossible to do anything in life, which is why a lot of times by the time people show up to work with me, it's affected every area of their life, their career, their relationships, sometimes their sleep. Just started working with a guy. He had said that, for a long time, he couldn't even eat anything. His appetite was severely suppressed. It's horrible. Okay. And so just trust that there are things going on that you're never going to understand, right? I'm talking to the loved ones now. You're never going to understand what your loved one is going through, but you just have to trust that it's severe, even though there's no tests that show that, okay? The second thing is I want you to resist the urge to look at them as broken or different or somebody who's sick, because that's just going to make them stressed out, okay? I want you to look at your loved one as a normal person who's just going through a lot and talk to them normally, okay? And that leads me to the next thing. Don't check in on them all the time. It's one thing if you check in on them, every couple days or something. I mean, unless there's just like an extreme, period of time that they're going through and they need a little bit more, just connection or whatever. But resist the urge of just constantly being like, hey, you okay? Are the symptoms still there? Because that's going to make them stressed out. That's going to cause them to think about the symptoms. Don't do that, okay? Just check in on them periodically and talk to them normally. Just have regular conversations. Try to steer the conversation towards regular everyday activities. We don't want to be in denial of the symptoms, and it's not that you can't ever talk about the symptoms with them, but they're building their whole lives around the symptom, the person who's suffering. And the last thing that you want to do is fuel that by making the symptoms the center of the conversation, okay? And then the third thing, this is going to be the hardest for you to hear, especially if you're a mom or dad. And I know this because I am a dad. I have 3 beautiful, amazing girls, and I would die for them. But you have to accept that only they can make themselves better. I get emails and calls all the time from, especially moms and dads who tell me that their kid is suffering with these symptoms and they don't know what to do. And honestly, I very rarely take their kid on as a client. And the reason why I don't is because I used to do that. And if the mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whoever or brother or sister wants that person to recover, but that person isn't at a place where they are absolutely fed up with these symptoms to the point that they're ready to make the changes that they need to get their body and nervous system in a better state, it is a complete waste of everybody's time. I'm looking for the people that are fed up. And by the way, everybody says they're fed up. I'm not talking about, do you not like the symptoms? Of course, nobody likes the symptoms. I'm talking about, are you ready to stop trying to use your mind to beat this? Are you ready to accept that it's going to take some time and it's going to take some adjustments? You're going to have to get back in your body, befriend your body. We got to make some lifestyle adjustments. There's no quick fix to this too. That's another thing. Have you accepted that there's not going to be a quick way out of this? There's not going to be one quick thing that you can do to get rid of this. There's a lot of layers. When I'm working with a client, we look at sleep, we look at nutrition, we get them back in tune with their body. This is interoception, the experience of the embodied self. We befriend their body. we release the tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue from their body. Well, I should say we release the tension, adrenaline, and emotion, and then make lifestyle adjustments that reduce fatigue in their body. Most people aren't ready for that. That's why, like, for every probably 4 to 5 people that reach out to work with us, we may end up working with one of them, because we're so careful with who we let into our program, because we've created this culture of people that are just desperate to beat this. And that's whenever it works, right? But all that I'm saying is that if your loved one is not at a place where they're really ready to do the things that they need to do to beat this, it doesn't matter how much that you want them to beat this. And I know that as a parent, to see your child suffering is literally hell on earth, right? I know that if my kids are suffering, I will literally move heaven and earth to get them the help that they need. And maybe as parents, you're used to being able to manifest solutions, or again, maybe it's grandparents, or maybe it's your brother or sister, just a loved one in their life. You're used to being able to help them. But this is the one puzzle that you just can't seem to solve. You've told them to take a walk. You've told them to take some time off work. You've told them just to, not think about it. You've told them to just give it time. You've told them to sleep it off or change their diet or this thing and that thing, and it's just not working. And it makes you feel so disempowered as a parent, or just some loved one in general that's trying to help them. In fact, I've got a client right now, amazing client, and he actually pretty much used to be a bodybuilder. He went from like 180 pounds to like 230 pounds of just solid muscle at one point in time, which is just unthinkable to do. And he has a history of being able to use his mind to overcome anything. And he's very productive. He's a go-getter. He's like, we'll get it done. And he's being very humbled right now. He has a lot of emotion that's built up. That's one of the things that we're doing, is we're really getting him into a calmer body, because whenever your body's super tense, it prevents your emotions from processing. And he's got a lot of suppressed emotions that are going to need to release. But first, we have to get him back in his body. We have to get him releasing the buildup of tension, adrenaline, and emotion from the body. And these things take time, right? So anyway, with that being said, his dad is a great dad. My God, it seems like just one of the best dads that you could have. And, he feels very disempowered right now, because he sees his son suffering and he doesn't know what to do. And he's trying to encourage him, and he's giving him general advice. But that general advice, even though it's done with a good heart, it's actually making his son worse, because this is a situation that general advice is not going to work for, right? And so if you are the loved one, resist the urge to give your child general advice. If they're dealing with true depersonalization realization, they are in a trauma state. And you're going to hear trauma, and you're going to think, oh, well, they haven't been through a car accident. They haven't lost a loved one recently. They haven't been through a natural disaster. They haven't gone to war. What are you talking about? Trauma. That's a 20th century understanding. A 21st century understanding of trauma would say that trauma is a state. It's not an event. It's a state of overwhelming stress. And for a lot of people, the stress builds up over time. It's complex trauma, right? They've got a long history of stress. Now, that doesn't mean that they're in an abusive environment or anything like that. It could just mean that they don't really know how to properly self-regulate, and thus they've been around environments that create emotional distress just in general. Even going to school as a kid can be very distressing. Going to work can be very distressing when you don't know how to self-regulate, and it all built up. And maybe there was a catalyst. Maybe there was a particular event that happened that kind of escalated that stress to the point of overwhelm. But most people that I work with, which there are some exceptions, but most people, there's been a long history of stress. I just started working with somebody that there isn't a long history of stress, and there was one particular bad reaction to drugs. I just mentioned it. The psilocybin mushrooms and the marijuana together was just a nasty combination that really overwhelmed this person. They've got a relatively calm history. So that would be a major trauma. It's like a lightning strike. It's like a sudden state of overwhelming stress, okay? But anyway, the answer for your loved one to get out of this is not random positive activities, right? It's doing things, your loved one doing things that communicate safety to their nervous system. They are in a threat response. They are technically in the freeze response, or probably also in fight or flight too. But that's a threat response. Their body is preparing for a threat. So we don't need to be doing random positive things like take a walk or positive self-talk or CBT or just don't think about it, distraction, or trying to accept your symptoms, sleep it off, eat healthy. Like, none of these things are bad. And some of those things I tell my clients to do, but we specifically need to do things that communicate safety to the nervous system. Okay. And we've already been talking about what some of those things are. Directly releasing the tension, adrenaline, emotion from their body is going to be a big one. Okay. But then the second primary thing is co-regulation, working with somebody that understands and can validate their experience and can really build a secure attachment relationship as they are learning how to self-regulate. Studies have shown that up to 45% of them getting out of these symptoms is co-regulation. And that's honestly one reason why I'm able to help so many people, because as a former symptom sufferer, I understand what they're going through and I can validate their experience and I can build hope. A big thing that I do with my clients is I instill certainty in them. Whenever they're feeling hopeless, I'm like, dude, you're going to beat this. It doesn't matter how much you don't believe that it's going to happen. It doesn't even matter if you don't even believe this is going to work. This isn't a theory. This is physiology. We are doing things that communicate safety to the body and nervous system, and it's going to work. It's going to get you out of these responses. It can't not work unless we don't do these things. But a lot of recovery, almost half, is not even about what you do. It's about who. It's about working with somebody that can build that secure attachment relationship, build hope and validate their experience, and just be there to build hope during the ups and downs of recovery. Because rewiring the nervous system doesn't happen overnight. It is a very up and down process. Now, it doesn't have to be me, but it's very hard to find people that have been through these symptoms or people that just can create hope for this particular symptom set. So regardless of whether it's me or somebody else, your loved one, or you, if you're the person suffering, needs to have a lot of co-regulation, right? Some people don't need as much as others, but a lot of people, especially if the symptoms have been ongoing for several months or even several years, you're going to need a lot of co-regulation. As you're learning how to self-regulate, which is directly releasing the tension, adrenaline, and emotion from the body, okay? It's been said that co-regulation precedes self-regulation, meaning a lot of people need that sense of safety that comes from that secure attachment relationship, from that hope, validating their experience as they are learning how to self-regulate. Co-regulation, it's a lot like training wheels on a bicycle. It's there temporarily to aid that person as they're learning to get into a comfortable, relaxed body, which takes a lot of time to do. And so that's one of the things. And then just to give you another thing that I do with my clients that communicates safety is your loved one needs to get back to living life. So this is probably what you're thinking. If you're the mom or you're the dad or, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, whatever, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe they just need to, take time off work. They need to take time away from school. They need to just get away from life and work on their recovery. That's probably what your loved one thinks too, which, by the way, I just realized, I don't know what that is. I'm a dad, and I've got a 2-year-old terrorist, by the way. Well, she's almost 2, and there's just usually stains somewhere on me. It's pretty much normal at this point in my life. But what I was going to say is your mind is going to tell you, okay, well, if they're stressed out at work or at school or in their life, well, then let's just pull back. Let's just get them, you know what? Let's go on a vacation. Do you know how many times that I have spoken with people that their parents or grandparents or loved ones brought them on a vacation? Because again, they're just going through the list of all the things that work for them, taking a break from living life, taking a vacation, taking a walk, staying more hydrated, changing their diet, just giving it time, just not thinking about it. And while these things may help general situations, and I know I'm getting passionate, but this is like, I want you to not make these mistakes. This is not a general situation. This is not a general situation, which is why general solutions do not work, right? And I know you're trying to help your loved one, but telling them to do a bunch of random positive things are not going to get to the root of this, because it's a very particular problem that requires a very particular solution. Okay. And they're already probably not going to get a very specific solution whenever they go to a licensed mental health professional, even though you should, by the way, try to find like a trauma-informed licensed mental health professional if you go that route. But doctors are probably not going to understand. Their therapist is probably not going to understand. And then they're going to try a bunch of random programs that don't teach stuff that's backed up by neuroscience, whether it's acceptance or distraction or whatever. It's going to waste their time. And then they've got you telling them to do random things. It's going to create so much chaos and stress and pressure into an already stressful, chaotic, and pressureful situation. Okay. They need to do things that communicate safety. So they need to get back to living life. Okay. It's called exposure. Whenever you run from sensory triggers, which is sensory data that is similar to painful past experiences, your brain assumes that whatever you're avoiding is a lion trying to eat you. So they need to be living life coupled with starting to self-regulate. This is a big thing that I teach with my clients, which, by the way, the 5 shifts deal from trauma, anxiety, panic, and DPDR Masterclass, it's below, it's free. It will show you some things that they can start doing, or if you are the sufferer and you're watching this, to start to self-regulate. It also gives you the 5 shifts that you need to make. Check that out. I put 6 months into it. I poured my heart and soul into it. There is an offer to work together at the end, but even if you don't work with us, it is going to add incredible value to your life. But anyway, you don't need to take your loved one, or you, if you're the sufferer watching this. The answer is not you need to get away from life. That's just going to create a layer of stress through avoidance. You need to be living your life coupled with starting to listen to your body and self-regulate, okay, and setting up boundaries to make sure that you're not driving your body into the ground. In fact, one of the clients that I just started working with, amazing young man, he told me yesterday, whenever we were having a private coaching call, he was like, prior to working with you, he said the only thing that I would do to self-regulate, which I told him this wasn't self-regulation, this was escapism, but he said was watch TV and smoke weed. That was the only thing. And I said, dude, neither one of those things are self-regulation. Self-regulation is the regulation of the self, right? The TV is a way to dissociate, which means to separate. And the marijuana was also an escape, and it was a way to numb the body. By the way, not saying if you smoke weed that you're a bad person or anything like that. We're not getting into that, especially, medical marijuana. Like, I know that there are incredible benefits for some people for that, and even recreational. I'm not judging you. I don't judge anybody. I'm not one of those people. But what I'm saying, well, I will add probably, 30% of the thousands of people that I've worked with over the last 6 years came to me because of a bad experience with marijuana. Okay. So while I'm not going to judge anybody for it, especially, I understand there are medicinal purposes and all that stuff, there are a lot of people that have a very negative reaction to it. Okay. They do too much too quick. They don't have enough tolerance for it, or maybe they just get an upper strain. And if you have a history of anxiety, you're more susceptible to a negative adverse reaction. And also, apparently, some people have a genetic predisposition because of how their endocannabinoid system is structured, to where they may be more vulnerable to the effects of THC. But marijuana is not good for everybody. And even people like Joe Rogan, who's one of my favorite podcasters, he's a huge proponent of marijuana, but he even will say now, like, hey, it's not for everybody, right? Which he didn't say that early on, but now he realizes, like, hey, it is just not for some people. I cannot tell you the amount of people that I have worked with that a bad marijuana experience, either an edible or smoking it, led to severe traumatic stress, which led to depersonalization, realization, and other symptoms too. And that was me. But it wasn't just the marijuana experience. It was all of the painful experiences that were creating a lot of stress and fatigue in my body. Plus, I suppressed my emotions. All of that coupled with the marijuana experience, right? The marijuana experience was the straw that broke the camel's back. But anyway, going back to this guy, I said, none of those things are self-regulation. It's escapism and numbing. And I said, but that's not me saying anything negative about you. You were just trying to feel better. And I said, in fact, this is a skill set. Okay, if I watch TV and if I smoke weed, I feel better. So you have this ability to make yourself feel better. We just have to change the way that you're making yourself feel Instead of making yourself feel better through numbness and dissociation, let's make you feel better through interoception, the experience of the embodied self, and self-regulation and getting proper co-regulation. And then the other thing, lastly, that your loved one needs is an education about what's going on, the science of all this. Believe it or not, everybody wants the how-to. Everybody wants, what do I have to do? 45% of recovery is co-regulation, and a large percentage of recovery is getting the right information, right? One of the first things that I do with my clients is I take them through a course that I have where I explain the neuroscience of what's going on before we get into the how-to. And then I have a whole nother section that's going to take about 5 to 6 hours to get through of nothing but neuroscience. And you're thinking, how is neuroscience connected to my recovery? Because remember, we're trying to do things that communicate safety. And whenever you have these symptoms and you don't know why they're happening, your anxious brain fills in the blanks and says, well, maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe I'm becoming psychotic. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Maybe my brain is broken, right? I used to have the fear of epilepsy. I thought that I was becoming psychotic. I thought that I was going crazy. I definitely just thought the symptoms are permanent and that there was no hope. And that's because I didn't have the right information. And for years, I thought that my friends laced the marijuana with something. I was like, how in the world did I have such a severe reaction to the marijuana whenever my friends didn't? They must have laced it. How could all of these horrifying symptoms happen unless the marijuana was laced with something? But once I got the education about complex trauma, which, by the way, check out the 5 Shifts Masterclass. It's going to go over more about complex trauma and the symptoms of it and a major trauma. It's going to explain a lot of things about DPDR. All of a sudden, I was like, you know what? Whenever I lost my grandma in high school, I didn't deal with that. I never really processed that emotion. I never really processed the emotion of my parents' divorce. I have now, by the way, but at the time, I was 18. I never processed the emotion of being severely bullied and the emotion of failing the 8th grade and having to do the 8th grade again. I never processed so many things that happened to me. And not only that, but whenever you're bullied, like one of the many reasons why bullying is so atrocious is because it starts to condition that person's nervous system to be on guard all the time. It doesn't just affect you whenever you're being bullied, because when you're not being bullied, you could be bullied. And so it starts to train your nervous system to just constantly be prepared in case the bully shows up. That was me. The bullies would find me and they would kind of corner me where there wasn't a camera at school, and they would beat the living crap out of me or in the locker room, which they would never mess with me now, mostly because of my biceps, which oh crap, they're not there. I'm working on it though. As you guys can see, there's a workout, there's a training thing behind me. You'd think there'd be some big guy walking around with all these weights. I'm working on it, guys. No, but seriously, like, my nervous system was trained for a long time to be on guard. And then my brothers would scare me. Like, we'd be outside playing flashlight tag, and it was all in fun, but they would be like, shh, guys, what is that? And I would go, oh, and I would run inside. And then, by the way, I also watched some very scary movies. I watched particular Signs and Jeepers Creepers, man. Like, as a kid, like, just to give some advice, kids and even adults should not watch scary movies. And I know you may be hearing that, and you may think, oh, I can handle it. You're basing your ability to handle it off of the immediate response after the show is over. But what you're not understanding is you're literally, and don't listen to me, and most of you are not going to listen to me, and that's okay, but you're literally creating sensory triggers that are affecting you, even if it's subconscious. Because now your brain has paired the sensory data of that movie with a threat because of the emotional distress that you felt while you were watching it. And now whenever you experience similar sensory data to that movie, your nervous system is going to respond to that, even if it's below the level of conscious awareness. Technically, we don't even become aware that our body is in fight or flight response until fear kicks in. Fear, according to the neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, is not an emotion. It is whenever you consciously become aware that your body is in fight or flight response and you have a sense of danger. But you can be going into fight or flight response below the level of conscious awareness months or even sometimes years before it intrudes into your conscious awareness. You got to be really careful with that stuff. Anyway, those movies traumatized me, led to all kinds of triggers. I was terrified to be around cornfields. I got a phobia of the dark because of that. I had nightmares that an alien was attacking me because of the Signs movie. All that I'm trying to tell you, and I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore you anymore, is that the marijuana experience I now know was the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay? And once I got that understanding of complex trauma, think of it like slowly filling up a cup of terrible Mountain Valley blueberry coffee, which is the sponsor of today's video. No, it's not the sponsor. I'm never going to buy that coffee again. It's not good. McDonald's blueberry coffee, though, they don't sell it anymore at Walmart. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, it allowed me the knowledge of complex trauma, getting the neuroscience of my nervous system allowed me to put a period where there was a question mark. And I also remember coming across a very well-meaning individual. I won't say this person's name, but they gave kind of like bro science. Okay. So bro science is like, you've probably heard of this. Like if you go to the gym and there's just like some guy that, watch some YouTube videos and, learn how to work out, he's going to give you probably some good tips, but it's bro science, right? It's the difference between going to that person versus somebody who has their degree in nutrition and fitness or something, right? Or just has really, really, really studied fitness and nutrition to the point where they've looked at what the world's experts are saying and they're bringing a very informed opinion. Well, I was getting bro science and I was being told that DPDR were a symptom of anxiety. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because there were months and months of time where I was completely numb and there was no anxiety. And I was like, and this person's response to the people that say that they're experiencing DPDR without anxiety, I'm not making this up. They said, oh, so you're going to trust people that are experiencing severe DPDR as if they really understand what they're going through? But once I started to understand that there are two states of trauma, in the deepest state of trauma, which I teach my clients about this, it's called state 4 severe trauma, there is no anxiety. It's just you might be experiencing DPDR, memory issues, time can feel distorted. You actually might feel very, very, very depressed, and there's no anxiety at all. And it's almost like a bomb could go off next to you, and you wouldn't even notice it type thing. In state 3 moderate trauma, you're experiencing some anxiety symptoms and some trauma symptoms like DPDR. But do you see how powerful this is? Do you see how all of a sudden your brain's like, oh, that's why I'm experiencing this? And another thing this other person said, which again, I want to say was a well-meaning person that was trying to help. They said, as far as time filling off, they said, well, it's because, if you're observing moment by moment, it's going to make it feel like, time is longer than if you're just living your life. That was their explanation. But once I studied the neuroscience of this, turns out that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex starts to shut down during a trauma state. That's the timekeeper of the brain. So that's why time feels distorted. It's like, why is your memory off? Okay, well, the neuroscience would show us that whenever you enter a trauma state, your memory transitions from registering as explicit narrative-based memory to implicit procedural memory, meaning that when you recall events, you may not have that narrative of beginning, middle, and end. Everything will feel broken up, or you might even not remember anything at all. So do you see how powerful that information is? Because all of a sudden, you can lay some of these fears to rest. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not going crazy. This is the appropriate response that my nervous system has because of the state that I'm in. So when it comes to helping your loved one, have them watch the 5 Shifts webinar. And if you are that person, of course, watch that for sure. But we're already doing some of these things in this video. I'm already getting you on track to make sure that you're not in a wrestling match with symptoms that are biologically correct for the state that you're in. And that's another thing too, is people build their whole lives around these symptoms and they're trying to get rid of these symptoms. Trying to directly get rid of these symptoms is like picking an apple off an apple tree. The best that you're going to get is a temporary delay between when you pick the apple and when it grows back, but it's going to keep growing back. And that's like this acceptance, distraction stuff, random positive activities, all these things that are not specifically communicating safety to the nervous system. You're picking apples off an apple tree. You haven't recovered yet. And the apples are going to keep growing back. The symptoms are going to keep growing back. And a lot of people mistake recovery. A lot of people mistake breaks from symptoms as recovery. If you have not gone through the process of rewiring your nervous system via the body, your recovery hasn't even begun yet. You've just got a break. And I'm happy that you're getting that break, but I love you too much to lie to you and tell you that you can bypass the body and see long-term results. And your results may last for years, and people think that they're recovered, and I get it. Whenever I used acceptance to recover the first time, it wasn't a recovery. I was like, dude, I'm not having panic attacks anymore. My DPDR isn't there very much anymore. I'm free. I was preaching the acceptance gospel. I was like an acceptance ambassador, and I am thankful that acceptance helped me eliminate resistance. And I teach my clients to invite in their symptoms. That's like 1% of what I teach people, but it is an element. And for some people, that actually can be a very important component of recovery. But my symptoms came back and acceptance didn't work. And that was terrifying. It's not enough. Okay. It's just not enough. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. I didn't get through the whole email, but those are some things that you need to be focusing on if you are the loved one of the person who is suffering. Oh, last tip real quick. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, okay? Do progressive muscle relaxation. Do 4-7-8 breathing. Get good sleep. Eat healthy. Just take some space away from everything, okay? Because you being stressed out is going to create a stressful environment for your loved one that's going to make it harder for them to recover. Take care of yourself. That's the best thing that you can do to help them, is help yourself, okay? I hope that has helped you. Smash the like button. I have to say smash because it's cool. I'm trying to be trendy and hip. Is getting weird. I'm 35 now, guys. I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm peppered gray now. It's getting a little bit weird, but I'm trying to use Gen Z language just to stay, stay cool. Anyway, hope you guys have a good day. Again, subscribe, click like, comment anything below if you have any questions. And if you're the loved one of someone suffering, you got more questions for me, click below. And also, at the end of that 5 Shifts Masterclass, there is a link to apply to work with me and my team to help you overcome these symptoms. We are seeing massive results. It is absolutely miraculous, the results that people are seeing. It is an honor to be able to be a part of these transformations. We cannot guarantee that we can help, but we would love to take a look at your situation to see. Fill out that application, speak with my team, tell them what's going on, and we'll see if we can help, okay? That is it, and I'll talk to you real soon.